Hi, everyone. Welcome to another ArtistWorks Spotlight series. Today, we're going to be featuring our ArtistWorks piano instructor, Zachary Deak. And his topic for the week is dynamics at the piano. So we're very excited to see what he has in store for us. If you haven't checked it out, on our YouTube page, we've been dropping mini lessons on this topic all week. There's a quick lesson for each day of the week. And today he's going to dig in a lot deeper. Later on in the show, we're going to be taking your questions as well. So please just drop them in the comments if you have any questions for Zach, and we'll get to as many as we can. And it's always fun to know where people are watching from. So drop a comment, say hi, let us know where you're tuning in from, and welcome everybody. And welcome, Zach.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here at today's Spotlight series. So today we're going to talk about the piano. We're going to talk specifically about musical dynamics at the piano. This has been the theme for the week, so all of the short videos that I did really just focused on that main topic. So today I'm going to just start by kind of going through the same topics that I went over in those videos, but maybe in a little bit more detail. Gives me an opportunity to elaborate a little bit more on some of those, and then it would be great to hear your feedback after in the Q&A. If you have any further questions about any of the specifics, it's a huge topic. It's so important. So let's just get right into it. Also, just for a little background, I'm here in my office at Old Dominion University in Virginia, in Norfolk, Virginia, and I have in my office two concert grand pianos. So these are both Steinways from different years. The one I'm playing on, I think, is from maybe the late 80s. It was completely refurbished at a certain point. So these are the biggest pianos that Steinway makes, and they're about 9 feet long, and they're intended for concert halls. So they're really a little too big for this room. So even when we were setting up the audio for this, we realized, it's just too much sound for a room like this. These pianos are intended for concert halls, and these are the pianos that you find in all of the concert halls around the world, whether that's Carnegie or the Philharmonie in Paris, or the Berlin Philharmonic, or the LA Phil. These are the pianists that they have on stage. Not everyone has Steinways, but it is kind of one of the most common instruments. So that'll become more relevant when I get kind of to the later part of my talk, when we speak specifically about different types of keyboard instruments, and there's the question of digital keyboard versus acoustic, and then even harpsichord, clavichord, forte piano, earlier versions of what this would then become. So that will become relevant as well. So first, what are dynamics? In its simplest form, it's just kind of loud and soft. So it's a way for us to speak about how loud a sound is or how soft it is. We don't use decibels or any sort of precise measurement when we play in the kind of classical world. Of course, if you're recording, you would, but when you're speaking about a piece or when you're working on a piece, you're not measuring any of these things. It's purely subjective. It's based on what you hear, and so developing that ability to become sensitive to this range of dynamics is incredibly important. So it can be loud, it can be soft, it can be everything in between. It truly is limitless and infinite, the possible sounds that you could create on a piano. And we know that in part because the sort of options available to us have broadened throughout history. So there are sounds that you will hear from the piano today that did not exist in previous generations, because they may not have had the instrument, but they just also didn't have their imagination wasn't yet open to those sounds. And we can talk a little bit about the reasons for that. So it really is about developing your creativity, your ability to imagine sounds, and then how you can then translate that into the instrument, into making those sounds a reality. So dynamics apply to all skill levels. From your first lessons at the piano, ideally you are already thinking about how you're playing the instrument. You're engaging with the sound that's coming back to you. You're playing soft sounds, you're playing louder sounds. Even with young children, this is taught from the very beginning, and then throughout your career and your experience learning piano, this is something that's very important. And at the very highest levels of playing as well, it is one of the most important tools we have to be expressive, to communicate emotion and meaning in our playing is really through dynamics. We can also use time a little bit, holding things back, pushing things forward. That's another important tool, but dynamics and color are essential. And why is that the case? There are many reasons. It's probably connected to language at a really fundamental at a fundamental level, in that the way that we speak, it's not just the words that we say, it's how we say things. And we can think of it that way in music. It's not just the notes we play, it's how we play those specific notes, and the dynamics and the color that we create is part of that. So that's kind of the first framework that I think is interesting to think about, and an interesting way of kind of approaching this. Now, the real question then becomes, how do you make different dynamics on the piano? And there's so many paradoxes when it comes to playing the piano because of the nature of the instrument. It is a percussion instrument at its core. That truly is what it does. There are hammers that hit strings. That's basically it. But as we know, it can do anything. It can do so many things. So it's all about creating these appearances, giving the impression of something else. So at a very basic level, how does the piano work regarding dynamics? And this is in one of the short videos I describe this. It's all about key speed. And if you think about how the piano works, you'll understand why, because it's a hammer hitting a string. And so the only variable that we have to manipulate, to adjust, or to have an influence on is the speed of that hammer. The faster the speed, the louder the sound, the slower the speed, the softer the sound. That's really it. There's not much else. Even further, the mass of the hammer never changes. So even if you're very heavy, you won't necessarily play louder than someone who's very slim, because the mass of the hammer is the only thing that counts. That you cannot change. So it's the speed of the hammer. So that's why key speed is the thing that will cause the hammer to go quickly or to go slowly. So key speed is the key to all of this. Entire question of dynamics is entirely defined by key speed. And you can try this out for yourself very easily at the piano, even just with one note. If I have a very slow key speed, if it's too slow, no sound will occur. The hammer won't even strike the string. So there has to be enough speed for a sound to occur. But if I do a really slow attack, I'll get a soft sound. The faster my attack is, the louder the sound. So they're directly correlated. And that's an important sort of fundamental thing to understand. Although it's fundamental, it doesn't help us that much, because when we play the piano, we don't really feel key speed. We feel weight much more easily than we feel key speed. If you have a feeling of weightlessness, I'm not thinking, oh, I have to play each key very slowly because it's soft, and oh, I want to play something a little bit louder, so I need to play a little faster. That's not really the process. That's not the sensation of playing the piano. The sensation, it's much easier to think about it in weight. So and it's a common thing that piano teachers will talk about, this feeling of weightlessness, of suspending weight when you want to play something very light, or to feel like you're using the full weight of your body, of your upper body, and bringing that energy into the instrument, and you get a big round sound. So we're not talking about key speed, but we actually are. It's just that the sensation, the feeling of the key speed is really important. Let me show you a little bit what I'm talking about, specifically with this Debussy prelude that I just demonstrated a little bit. This Debussy prelude is just such a wonderful example for talking about dynamics. So it starts off very, very pianissimo. So that's just an excerpt from the Debussy Prelude, Book 1, Number 10, La Cathédrale Engloutie, the Sunken Cathedral. So this is such a good example to demonstrate these things because Debussy asks us for so many different dynamics. He starts off pianissimo, but with these chords, even those first opening chords, it's difficult to control because he wants very soft at each extremes of the keyboard, like this. So that first chord, you have to make sure that all of the notes speak. If your key speed is too slow or the weight isn't distributed correctly, you won't get all of the notes. You know, you might get some of the notes. So it's finding a way to balance that. And it's a great way for us to think about how our entire body is involved in piano playing. So really the question is, it's just how your finger presses the key, but the reality is that it's your entire body that's involved with that. So this first chord and these successive chords are really good examples of how you can use your entire body and have that feeling of weightlessness in your upper body to produce these very soft but controlled sounds. And again, it's all about this thing of key speed that I mentioned, but that's not the sensation that I have when I'm playing. This floating feeling, I have to inhabit that physically as I'm playing, so that the music that's coming out of the instrument I have to reflect that same sensation of calm throughout my body as I play this. If, for example, I don't have that, if I start with that opening chord with with a sort of abrupt or nervous gesture, then it will be very difficult. Or if I'm overly tense, it's going to be very difficult for me also to sink into the key and to get that easy sound. There's an element of trust involved, and also kind of a trial and error to see, how to calibrate your relaxed body with the instrument. But this, it's such a good example for this. And then, of course, another good example is later on when we get this kind of chorale element here, this big fortissimo. And Debussy writes sonorous, loud, but without harshness. So he doesn't want a harsh sound, meaning he doesn't want an overly percussive sound. He wants it big and forte and resonant, like bells in a cathedral, or an organ playing in a cathedral, so that the sound is resonating and is kind of bouncing all over the walls, but that doesn't have this hit, this percussive quality. And so again, physically, the way I approach the keyboard is to reflect that resonance, that sound, and so that the point of impact is not too harsh, that there's always rebound. Let me show you that a little bit here. Chords, again, of course, fast key speed is necessary, but I would never think that when I'm playing this. I'm thinking about having a broad, big gesture that comes from my back, that comes from my shoulders, relaxed arms, and then listening to the sound that I'm getting in return. So that's how I'm able to get a really big, powerful sound, but hopefully not too harsh, not too percussive, but something that's really resonant. So in this piece, over a few pages, we go from very, very soft, very kind of transparent chords to these big resonant chords. And the way in which we accomplish that is specifically key speed, but not really. It's more about how that sensation in your body, the way in which you feel the weight moving into the keys. One other really important element about weight and about attack is specifically for these big chords is tension. So if, for example, I keep the tension in my body once the chord has played, first of all, it serves no purpose. That's another thing about the piano. We cannot change anything about our sound once we've made the sound. It's done. It's in the past. That's not the case for every instrument. Some instruments can adjust sound once the first sound has been made. We cannot. So we have to live with it. But also, since we can't do anything about it, we have to let it go physically as well. That tension, if I carry the tension once I've played the chord, then every successive chord will have that tension as well. So it's important whenever you're playing big, loud passages to really make sure that you're relaxing your body after every impact, that there's always this release after every big chord, because for the quality of the sound, but then also for every successive sound, every chord following every measure that comes next, it's incredibly important to keep that level of relaxation throughout. So those are a few kind of general ideas. Something that comes up very often in my VEs and in my lessons is hand independence. So this relates directly to dynamics, because as pianists, we're required so often to play one hand in one dynamic and the other hand in another dynamic. We are often both the soloist and the accompanist. So if you imagine a pianist playing with a singer, the pianist playing some sort of accompaniment, and then the vocalist singing on top of it. So we have to gauge how we accompany the solo part. But so much piano music is written where the soloist is your right hand and your accompaniment is your left hand. And so how to gauge that? So let's look at a few examples. The really classic example of this is in classical era piano music. So, I mean, we see it everywhere, but a very common place is going to be composers like Mozart, Haydn, excuse me, early Beethoven, Schubert, Clementi. It's an incredibly common texture in the piano where the right hand has the motive, the thematic material, and the left hand has an accompaniment. And so this same idea of weight, of balancing the weight in one hand and in the other, feeling like you're using two different levels in each hand, and specifically that feeling of weightlessness in one hand and allowing the weight to release into the keys in the other. Let me show you a very clear example that a lot of you probably know. This is from Mozart's sonata in C major, the sonate facile. It's called the easy sonata. It's not so easy, but it gives us a great example. And there are many, many examples of this throughout the classical repertoire and even into romantic. And yeah, it's everywhere. So what I'm going to show you first is something called the Alberti bass, and this is a very typical left-hand accompaniment. All right, so this is just a arpeggiated figure called an Alberti bass. It's very, very common in this style. Many composers use it. It's kind of like a standard type of accompaniment. It's based on chords. It's just one, then part of a 5/7 chord, 1 4 4 6 4 1 5 1. Very, very simple, straightforward chords. But to make the texture a little bit more interesting, the composers arpeggiate it. So that's your Alberti bass in the left hand. Not very interesting. It's totally conventional, and it's intended to be so. But the right hand has the motivic material. So that motive, that theme in the right hand is obviously the interesting part. That's what we really actually need to hear. And so what often happens is students who don't have a lot of experience with this play something like this. And so that's a totally normal way to play it based on what you're seeing. And also there's a temptation that the composer gives you here. But the issue with that is that the left hand is drowning out the right hand. The important material, we don't really hear it because we hear. And the reason that this is so prominent is because the notes are moving. So there are these eighth notes, ba 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 ba. So any movement is going to be more audible than any sustained note. So just naturally, even if you played everything at the same level, this would always sound more than the sustained note. The sustained note will always decrescendo, and the moving notes will always continue to seem like they're getting louder. So you really have to counteract that and make an effort to play the left hand very soft piano and the right hand mezzo forte. The composer will never tell you this. The composer will just say piano or mezzo piano or whatever. Just give one dynamic. But you as a pianist have to recognize, okay, the left hand is accompaniment texture. It needs to be a little bit softer. It needs to support the melody, but it's not the dominant part. However, the right hand needs to soar. It needs to project out into the space, just as a singer would. So how do you do that? There are a few things you can do. The first, I would say, is you play the right hand alone and play it very expressively. Try to phrase it as beautifully as you can. Try to really project the sound. Think about that feeling of weight, of legato, of connecting everything, of relaxing your wrist, relaxing your arm into the keys. So all of that is very important. So first you kind of establish what that feels like. Then you can do the same thing with the left hand. With the left hand, you can tell yourself, okay, first I'm going to stay very close to the keys. Similarly with the question of weight, The other thing that can really influence key speed is distance from the keyboard. If you're articulating, you have a higher risk of playing wrong notes. Also, there is a tendency to just play louder because you're coming from more distance, you're articulating, and so you're going to have a faster key speed. So first thing you can tell yourself is, okay, I'm going to stay really close. The closer I am to the keys, the easier it is for me to play soft. So it's making my life much easier. So first, that's kind of the first thing that you can tell yourself. Right hand can have a little bit more articulation, more attack. Left hand, less articulation, closer to the keys. You can already play around with that. You can exaggerate. You can exaggerate these things too to really show that difference. So close to the keys, and similarly that feeling of weightlessness. If you're really close to the keys and you feel weightless and you're getting a nice sound, that's perfect. That's all you really need to do. Then there's kind of a third, a third step, which is combining those two elements. The unfortunate truth is that the hands really like to imitate each other. So the tendency is to do the same thing in the left hand that you're doing in the right hand, and you really have to fight against that. The best way to do it is, as I said, to exaggerate the differences and to do it really slowly. So to take your time to feel those different sensations at a slow tempo. If you try to do it too quickly, too soon, the hands you're going to go to the kind of default, which is for the hands to imitate each other. And that can be hard to overcome. Often I get asked the question, are there exercises that I can do to work on this question of hand independence? There are, but I do feel that working on them in the repertoire, in the pieces, is much more valuable. In the course on ArtistWorks, I have specific etudes. There's one by Duvernois that a lot of the students have played. Something like that. That deals exactly with this question of hand independence with dynamics. One hand is playing very soft, the other hand is playing louder, and then they switch. That's the other thing too, is even in Mozart, we're going to see moments like this where the right hand's going to be dominant, but then it's going to switch and the left hand will be dominant. Let me show you an example of that. This is from a Debussy piece called Rêverie. So this piece also really incorporates this idea of two hands but doing different things. So I'll play a little bit of the beginning, and then I'll jump to the part where the left hand becomes more prominent. So the beginning starts like this. The left hand, very soft, very gentle, very quiet, and the right hand, this beautiful melody. So this is the Rêverie by Debussy, just a little bit of the beginning, and I'll jump to a later section. So here you heard this left hand, very gentle, and then the right hand, very expressive. So that's a similar type of balance that it's of course a totally different musical period, but similar idea as in the Mozart. However, a little bit later in the piece, the roles switch. The left hand has an expressive melody and the right hand has more of an accompaniment figure. If I keep with those same balance, it won't work. So let me lead into it a little bit. heard here how in the left hand we have this beautiful melody. And Debussy clearly tells us bring out that left hand. And in the right hand, just arpeggios. So they're not Alberti based, but it's very similar. It really serves the same function. It creates color, it creates background, it creates support, but it's switched to the right hand. So immediately I have to change the focus, change the weight, change the attack, basically stay close to the keys in my right hand, feel that weightlessness, that connection with the keyboard, but relaxed and not allowing to release my weight fully into the keys. And then in the left hand, kind of the opposite, allowing a little bit more articulation, following through a little bit more through the key, allowing the sound to bloom a little bit like that. And I don't want it to be too loud, of course, but to then find that balance. And of course, you're always listening to yourself. That's ultimately the most important thing. The only way you can adjust your dynamics or improve or play around with them and create new sounds is if you're hearing them and then making those adjustments, trying things out. That's really the case. It took me so long to figure out how to play this first chord in that Debussy prelude. You know, to find that you just try. There's the opening of the Debussy Violin Sonata. In the piano part, it just starts with a G minor chord and then a C major chord. That's the beginning of the piece, but the way in which you play that G minor chord and then following the C major changes everything. The G minor is a little bit somber, a little bit dark, and then the C major, oh, it's a little bit brighter. And the composers, they hint at these things, but they don't, give you a sort of detailed list of how to accomplish everything. You have to use your creativity and you have to practice specifically how you're going to voice that, how you're going to use dynamics to create that. So yeah, this is really an endless topic that we could go on for very, very long. As I mentioned before, there are all sorts of historical implications about keyboards. One final thing that I will like that I think is important. I know that a lot of you use a digital keyboard at home, and there are some challenges with that in terms of dynamics specifically. I don't know so much about digital audio. What I do know though is that reproducing what a concert grand can do at its finest detail is very difficult. The relationship, for whatever reason, in terms of the acoustics of this instrument, the relationship between the mechanics and the acoustics and the way it's built is such that it's difficult to replicate that. So you're always losing a little bit. You're always losing something with the digital piano. Also, there's the reality of the volume. You just turn it up or turn it down, something that we don't have here. So there are certain limitations. So your experience with the digital piano may be a little bit different. The better the digital piano, the better the dynamics and the better the touch and the more sensitivity. And that's really where the money goes, I think, is when you play a cheap keyboard, you really don't get much of that feeling that you get here. When you really play on an expensive one, that's what they're able to replicate. That's, I think, where a lot of the technology goes, in the feel of the keyboard and then creating that incredible range of dynamics. And I'm sure that, if Yamaha was listening to this, they would say that they've accomplished it. But I don't know. I think that those of you that play on digital keyboards may have a slightly different experience. So I think it's just important to mention that.
Yeah, great advice. And thanks for the demonstrations. Really clear. Great stuff. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the pedals play a role. Like, certain things can kind of add or diminish from the dynamic range.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And something I should have mentioned is that I talked endlessly about key speed, right? But the other thing that can help are the pedals, specifically the sustain pedal, because the sustain pedal, as you all probably know, it lifts the dampers off of the strings. So what I was demonstrating in the Debussy prelude, I'm holding down the pedal so all of the strings are resonating together. And so so that, of course, creates a volume of sound that these strings are resonating together. So although individually the sound, it kind of amplifies in a certain sense. If I change the pedal within that, of course, the bass note I won't have, and that's why Debussy wants us to hold the pedal, because we still get the resonance from the bass, so the entire instrument is resonating. And I'm sure that there's a physics element here too with the partials of the sound, so that he didn't know that, but it was intuitive to him. If I change the pedal, it sucks the sound away immediately because we no longer have that resonance. So there are immediate implications to dynamics with that pedal, the sustain pedal on the very right of the piano, and then the una corda pedal on the very left. Not all pianos have this. It's unique to grand pianos. And the una corda pedal on the very left shifts the entire keyboard. So I don't know if you can see it, but when I press this pedal, my keyboard is shifting to the right. And what that's doing is also the hammers are all shifting to the right. If you look at the hammers, they strike, most of them strike 3 strings at the same time. Not all of them, but most of them. And they create these little dents over time, and they harden. And so that hardening of the hammer creates a brighter sound. When you put the una corda, it shifts, or the soft pedal, it shifts the keyboard and shifts the hammers so that the hammers are striking in a place that is not so hard, that's much softer, and it gives a softer tone, it gives a more mellow, it gives a sort of subdued sound. It's on this piano is already kind of mellow, so I really rarely use it, but there is definitely a difference. It makes it, yeah. So pianists use that as well to control dynamics and to create these kind of muffled and soft types of muffled sounds. So yeah, and then the middle pedal is something entirely different. And again, not all pianos have this. Some of your upright pianos probably have what they call like a mute pedal or a practice pedal. So on upright pianos, some of them have a piece of felt that can be engaged between the hammers and the strings, and so that mutes the piano. And so on some of the uprights, I know some of the Yamahas have this. I think you press it and you can lock it in place. So this felt comes down, and this is one system. There may be others, and so that mutes the pianos. It's intended, I think, initially for practicing in apartments, so that you don't bother your neighbors, because I mean, I've had many experiences like that. Neighbors complaining about piano practice, saying something like, at first it was nice, but when you played the same thing over 30 times, it was not so nice, and please stop. And then we had to tell them, well, no, I'm not actually going to stop. I'm going to do the same thing every day, basically forever. So that can create some issues. So the practice mute can be helpful for your social life, I guess.
That's great. We've got a question here from Neil. Do you map out your planned dynamics before you start playing a piece? And you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but yeah, what's your approach if there's no dynamic markings written in a piece, for example, like what's your approach for sort of navigating how you're going to approach it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I won't necessarily do it before I learn a piece. And it depends, of course, on the piece and the era in which it was written, because composers like Debussy are very specific about what they want. They not only give you indications in like the traditional Italian pianissimo, piano, mezzo forte, forte, etc. They also write in the music and tell you the type of sound that they want often. Like in this case, Debussy wrote, a big sound, but not harsh. So he's telling you specifically the type of sound he wants, loud, but not harsh, or poetic terms to describe the type of sound. So he's really giving you a lot of information. But it is even then more important that you do track that out. So it's not necessarily something that I'll do immediately, but absolutely at a certain point I need to have a sort of clear map, particularly in a piece like this, of where are the high points, where am I going towards, because dynamics are so closely associated with expression. Often the most intense expressive point of the piece will often be the loudest, not always, but if the composer is showing that we're moving, we're going to this place, and this is kind of the climactic moment, then that needs to be very, very well planned out, and not just sort of improvised in the moment. Sometimes that'll work, but if you're building a crescendo, for example, the tendency is often to crescendo too quickly, and then you're already at the top, and then the climactic moment isn't as effective because you got there too soon. So yeah, absolutely planning these things out is important. Then with a composer like Bach, it's completely different. Bach did not, very, very, very rarely wrote any dynamics. There are only a few examples where he'll write forte and piano. The Italian concerto is one, but most of his music does not have dynamics. So first of all, the dynamics in the Baroque era are quite different already. But yeah, there it's based on harmony, based on tension, harmonic tension in the music. And then you have to think about the instrument and all sorts of other things. But yeah, it's an integral part to understanding the structure of the work. So planning it out at some point clearly in your mind is very, very important.
Awesome. Great advice. And yeah, if anyone else out there has any questions, just feel free to drop them in the comments. But I thought I'd take the opportunity just to get you to talk a little bit about your ArtistWorks school and sort of what folks can find in there, like what kind of stuff you cover. And you're in a unique position. I think the only instructor we have that started by doing a complete beginner on-ramp suite of lessons, but then expanding into a full all-level school. So tell us a little bit more about your curriculum.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so as Marcus said, the entire first part of the course is really for beginners. You can come to the course with no previous musical knowledge, and you'll learn how to read music, you'll learn how to read rhythms and notes, and really basic understandings of all elements of, I'd say, like Western classical music, and even some non-classical things like some chord progressions, sort of some pop chord progressions, little introductions to jazz, some slight improvisation, mostly though classical focused. So that whole first section, you can be a true beginner and start there, and then it's a progressive course. So each lesson builds upon the previous lesson. There's so much piano music available that it's not exhaustive. I mean, no course could be. So it's also what's great about the VEs is that you can submit pieces that are part of the course, and I give feedback, but you can also submit other pieces from other sources, other things that you might be working on the side, and I can help you with those as well. So the curriculum itself is complete in that it can really bring you from no knowledge to significant knowledge, but because of the VEs, it can also fill in any sort of gaps or any other repertoire that you might be interested in exploring. Then the second part of the course kind of leaves that progressive, there's kind of a, let's say, an exponential element to it, in that it gets, I think from level 6 or 7, it starts to get significantly more difficult. And so really the point is, everyone, regardless of where you are in your pianistic journey, you'll find something. So if you're someone who played in your life previously and are kind of just coming back to it, you'll find somewhere in the curriculum that's the right starting point for you. It may be at the very beginning. Maybe I've had students who want to review, and there were things in their original musical education that they may have missed out on, and so they just want to fill in some gaps and be reminded. So they move very quickly through all of those first lessons, or some who have been playing continuously for many years and just start because they see a specific piece that they want to do in level 8, and they just start there, and that's perfectly fine. This inherent flexibility is really wonderful, and I really work with every student where they're at. So there's no requirement. It's really what you want, and I always try to adapt to the student and to guide the student wherever the student wants to go. That's really the approach. So what I love about it is it provides structure and stability in the curriculum, but it also provides tremendous flexibility so that everyone gets a very personalized approach.
That's awesome. Yeah, really fantastic curriculum, and you cover so many different sort of aspects of playing. Dynamics being just a component of that. So it's really fun to get your sort of download on how this works and how you approach this stuff. I know it can be a really nebulous sort of detail, sort of something that often comes later after you've sort of figured out the mechanics for a lot of folks. Really cool stuff. I'm wondering if you might play something more for us while we're here.
Oh, all right. Let's see. Yeah. How about maybe a little Chopin? Yeah, why not? All right. Yeah, I'll play this Chopin Nocturne in F minor.
Bravo. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Very nice. Awesome. Well, we're almost getting to the end of our time here, but we just had a great question come in from Karina.
All right.
She's asking about playing pianissimo in a fast piece. I'll post the question here for you. So, as a beginner learner, since how loud or soft we play is dependent on speed execution, how do you manage that within a focus on a rhythm? For example, playing pianissimo in a fast playing piece of music.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it's true that a lot of the examples that I showed were very slow pieces, like even the one I just played. There is an example here in what I just played at the end. These are fast arpeggios there. They're written pianissimo to just sort of try to play them very soft. But yeah, excellent question. So there are a few things. The first, I would say, is staying close to the keys. But the issue then is articulation. So the question, how to play. First of all, it's difficult. That's the first answer. It's something that's difficult in piano playing. Playing fast passages very evenly and very soft. And that really is something that everyone has to work very hard to get. There are a few things that you can do. The first is having to do with articulation. So making sure that you're not over articulating. Very hard to get even. So staying as close as you can to the keys. Then that feeling of weightlessness. So playing around with weight. And even just like I'm doing with the C major scale or whatever the passage is, trying it in a few different ways, feeling that heaviness in your hand, releasing the weight into the keys, then gradually feeling like you're releasing it, and lightening, feeling that light touch of your fingers. Then there's a second very counterintuitive way of practicing that, which is you play it very, very loud and very, very articulated. This works very specifically with scales. An example would be like the Schubert Impromptu in E flat major. The goal, what you want here is a really soft, even light. But to get there, one way that you can practice it very, very slow and very, very articulated. What that can do is develop a sort of sensitivity so that you're able then to play it evenly and very soft once you go back to that much smaller gesture. So the answer is it's very difficult, but the key is in the small gesture. Sometimes practicing it very slow, very articulated, and then bringing that gesture smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller can really help to feel that difference in dynamics. But it's such an excellent point because there are these examples in the repertoire of very rhythmic, very fast pieces, but that need to be very soft. So yeah, that adjusting the gesture, being very conscientious of that, practicing it, feeling the weight a little less, and then also over-exaggerating that articulation, and then trying it with a very, very calm hand and seeing if that works.
Awesome. Well, I think that brings us about to the end of our time, but thank you so much for joining us today, Zach. Really great advice. Awesome stuff there. This will be available on our YouTube and Facebook page. So if you ever want to come back and revisit what's been done here today, feel free to do that. And check out the links in the description if you're not familiar with Zach's school. There's free sample lessons and you can check it out and sign up and learn directly from him anytime you like. So thank you everybody for tuning in today, and we'll see you again very soon. And once again, thanks so much, Zach.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.